Hello, everyone. Welcome to the course of International Business Management. Previously, we discussed and covered the concepts of globalization, where we discussed the globalization of markets and globalization of production. And then we discussed differences in the national economy, political system, and legal system. Also, we discussed on a previous occasion the economic development. We also covered the ethics, corporate social responsibility composites, and along with that, the different trade theories, including mercantilism, absolute advantage, comparative advantage, HO theory, the product life cycle theory, and so on. Moving forward, we discussed the different policies that affect the international trade in different countries and the regional economic integrations on different levels. Today, in this lecture, we will be covering the initial forms of international business, and then we will move forward to the discussion on foreign direct investment. There are different forms of international business that take place globally. The very basic fundamental type of international business is exporting, where there are very minimum efforts required, then followed by licensing. Franchising is also one of the most interesting and most followed type of international business. Then we have joint ventures, management contracts, Trunky projects, strategic alliances, and lastly, foreign direct investment. Now, in the next slides, we would be discussing each form or type of international business in detail. Exporting is the most common type of international business practiced throughout the world by all types of firms, including small and medium enterprises and corporations, incorporations, multinationals, etc. It is one of the very basic type of international business where there is the least effort taking place both on the basis of the risk and on the basis of investment. Exporting in a very basic phenomena is a practice of shipping or transferring goods from one country to another country. You can also call it from domestic country to a foreign country. We can also elaborate it that exporting involves transferring or shipping of goods from home host country to from home country to host country. In exporting, one country, that is, the exporting country, is usually selling the goods to a foreign country, which is the importing country. The sale of capitals, goods, and services across the international borders or territories is called exporting. Now, exporting is a selling act of selling to a foreign country. This is one of the easiest way. However, in exporting, there are different composites which are involved. For example, you have to go through the custom process, you have to go through the tariff and duties imposed by the foreign country or the importing country. So you have to obey all those components. Most of the countries or companies are involved in export businesses. They produce products in their nation, in their own country. They look for the markets where there is a demand for their product, and they send their products for selling purpose into those countries. Now, due to the World Trade Organization, due to the WTO, due to the free trade and tariff agreements, due to the GATT agreements, and different type of economic and regional integrations between various countries, exporting has become easier because there is low tariff nowadays that we have already discussed in our previous lectures. The second type of or form of international business is licensing. Now, in licensing, the companies who want to expand their business and they want a strategic entry into a foreign market or international market, they usually in the beginning prefer to go through a licensing. The reason is that licensing is a low risk and an entry to a fast foreign market with a very simple tactics. That is why they prefer for going for a licensing. There are different foreign market entry options where exporting is also one of the option, but due to the exporting, they can only send their goods into the foreign market, but they cannot get that physical presence in those markets. Therefore, they either go for the joint ventures, foreign direct investment is also an option, franchising is also an option, and licensing is one of it. It is for those who wants a potential entry into a market with relatively low risk involved in terms of time, resources, and capital requirements. So, what they do is that they go for the licensing because through licensing they get the localization with the help of the foreign partners. They do not have to go through the strict international business regulations. They do not have to invest a lot into that country, so their cost is reduced and they can expand their business very quickly into those markets. However, along with different advantages that we discussed right now, there are different disadvantages as well because they may be lose control over that market or the business in that market. Maybe they are unable to control their quality. Maybe there are different issues which may affect their brand image and brand name in that foreign market, and they will have low return on investment in those markets. So certainly there are advantages and disadvantages associated with going through licensing into the country of where they want to expand their business. However, it is still one of the vibrant option available for the international business. Now we will move forward to the another slide of franchising because there is a bit of difference between licensing and franchising. So we will differentiate between licensing and franchises after discussing or elaborating the franchising in the next slide. Now, as far as the franchising is concerned, it is also considered to be a type of or a specialized form of licensing in which the franchisors not only sell intangible property to the franchisee but also insist that the franchises agree to abide a strict rules as to how it does the business. Now, what does it mean? It means it is a simple type of an agreement with the extended terms and conditions. Now, we will come towards the differences, which will be helpful in clarifying the difference between licensing and franchising. Licensing and franchising both are a legal relationship between the company and the people who are operating it into the foreign markets. There is a difference. First difference on the legal aspects is that licensing has a limited scope and it relates only to the use of trademark or technology, etc. Whereas franchising involves a relationship that goes beyond the grant of the license. Over there, they not only give them the approval or they do not grant only the use of trademark or technology or their brand name, but they also bound the franchisees, the people who have acquired their franchises, to follow their rules and regulations, their quality standards, their operational procedures, and their standard operating procedures, as well as the framework or the model of the business, how it operates. This is one of the fundamental difference between the franchises and licensing, whereas it is not only limited to the use of legal composites. There are many different elements as well. For example, in franchising, they have to register properly, whereas in licensing, they does not require to register properly. Then franchisee has to offer some rights. A licensee does not have to offer specific rights. Support and training to the franchises is provided by the company itself, whereas in licensing, it is not necessary or the company is not bound to provide support and training. Now, in both cases, both the franchisee and the licensee will have to pay their royalty payments on an agreed basis throughout the tenure of the contract. There is a use of logo and trademarks are used by the exactly by the franchisee, but the licensee can use them or may not use it, right? When it comes towards the control, right from the purchase of the raw material towards the finishing good and to the environment created for the customers and employees, franchisor or the franchise must follow the standards or the standing operating procedures set by the company itself. But whereas the licensee does not have the control over the licensor in this regard. If we go for the different examples, so some of the renowned example of franchising system is McDonald's, Subway, Dunkin' Donuts, etc. Whereas there are companies who were using licenses of Microsoft Office, there is no such restrictions on them. Next type of international business is called joint venture. Joint venture has become one of the more frequently used and interesting form of international business in this era. Joint venture refers to the establishment of a firm that is jointly owned by two or more independent firms. This means that it is an arrangement between two or more parties or firms where they agree to enter into a specific contractual agreement to carry out some specific business they want. Now, the purpose of joint venture is to combine their strengths, which eventually reduces their weaknesses, and they get together, combine their resources to create a competitive advantage while they minimize their risk as well. Entering into the contract, the parties should specify their purpose, goals, and limitations of the venture, because it does not mean that the both companies or firms overcome or they lose their identity. Rather, they have their own identities intact and they are combined together. They get their hands together for a specific project. Some of the examples of joint venture include the joint venture between Google and GSK. They wanted to enter into a joint venture agreement to produce bioelectric medicine, with the ratio of their ownership was 45% of Google and 55% of GSK, and it lasted for around 7 years with a capital of 540 million euros. Another example was a joint venture between Uber and one of the vehicle manufacturing company known as Volvo. Their goal was to produce driverless cars, and their partnership in this project was 50-50. This business was worth $350 million as per the agreement. Next, and one of the most famous that we all are aware of, was the joint venture between Sony and Ericsson, where they together manufactured smartphones and gadgets. And after several years of operations, Sony was able to acquire Ericsson's mobile manufacturing division as a whole. Next example that we all are aware of is between the BMW and Toyota, where they got together in a research to produce a hydrogen fuel cells, vehicle electrification, and ultra lightweight material. Another was a Google and NASA got together to develop a Google Earth project. There are several joint ventures or alliances of such type in the airline industry as well. So these are some of the examples of joint venture which where there is a minimum risk involved and both the companies play with their strengths. Management contracts and manufacturing contracts, both as a form of international business, has gained attention of the giant firms throughout the world. In management contracts, one firm in one country agrees to operate a facility, a part of the facility, or provide different sort of services to a bigger company or to a different company in another country for an agreed upon fees. Now the advantages it carries out is that the firm where they do not possess a specific specialization or expertise, they can reach out to the other firm to operate their company, their division of the company, or do any specific type of operation as may be desired. It is a fundamental fact that it is not necessary that every firm gains an absolute advantage or competitive advantage in every operation they do. So, there are different firms who are readily available to lend their services to the other companies for the areas of their own expertise. It depends on the different factors between the company who is offering their services and the company or the firm which is acquiring their services. It may be of different types. Maybe they require different people, different employees to hire for them. Maybe they require to run the operations of their firm in the foreign country, or they may require them to produce something for them. So the management contracts are based on different terms and conditions, and the fee is decided prior to getting into contract between different companies. Now, contrary to it, additional to it, there is another type of contract which is called manufacturing contract. Now, manufacturing contracts are between the company, the brand who acquire different small companies or relatively advanced companies to produce things for them, to manufacture as a whole a finished good or a part of it or a raw material for that. We have seen different types of companies going into manufacturing the entire product. For example, Microsoft is not producing their own uh, products, Amazon, Apple Macintosh, and different technological firms, they acquire the services of the different firms. For example, we have seen hiring of the services and labor, manpower is required, so the companies go for the third party to hire labor for them. We have seen manufacturing of a part of a product of one company for the another in the airline industry, in different manufacturing side. In the automobile industry, we have seen rubber industry, aluminium industry, and the plastic industry, including the bottling and packaging. We have seen using facility and equipments, people hire and take one company's facilities and use them in their or for their own purpose. So it gives you different advantages as it saves you time uh, to needed to set up a manufacturing unit in other places, so you do not have to manufacture it by your own. Contract manufacturing has been beneficial in a situation where a company does not have the knowledge or certain place, or they do not have the area of expertise. A firm can save different cost of production, the capital that they have to invest in purchasing the equipment. So we have seen different companies in from the west, they are moving towards the low cost countries like China, India, Malaysia, Vietnam, and so on. We have seen hiring of contract manufacturing firms to increase their productivity. We have seen it. Then we also saw that mutually beneficial firms, they make a kind of a supply chain and value additional composites. So these are different examples and not limited to this list discussed. However, along with the advantages, it also comes up with the risk associated with it. So the risk mostly we see is that they do not have the control over those companies, neither on the quality, maybe the lack of the commitment may be an issue. They do not know the people they are hiring, they have not seen their qualities as a human resource. Maybe we become more dependent on those contractors, so it may create hurdles for us, it may affect our process or cycle. It comes up with outsourcing maybe a lengthy time, finding a right person or a right firm, and creating a trustworthy relationship that may be very difficult. So there are risks associated with it, but it is having and holding so many advantages that we can take benefit of. Trunky Project is another form of international business where a firm gives a project or contract to another company who is responsible for the construction and establishment of their company, which is a foreign client to them in their domestic environment. They are also responsible to establish the whole production unit, the installation of machinery, and appointing and hiring of the staff. Not only appointing them, but also training them. Once the whole process is complete and the company is about to launch and their pilot tests are run successfully, then they hand over the complete and ready to start project to the client. This is called a Trunky Project. Strategic alliance is another common type of international business. It is basically an arrangement between two companies or agreement between two or more parties or companies who come together for a specific goal and objective, and they does not lose their independence. These two or more parties or companies usually form a strategic alliance when each has some expertise or business resources which help in achieving the target or enhancing their business. It is a bit different from joint venture. But a joint venture can also be a form of strategic alliance when they combine together to form another new company without losing their existence status, current status. This is less than a proper merger or partnership of two companies. The parties with a common interest come together to achieve a common business objective with the intentions to earn profit. It is an arrangement by which these two companies or more share their resources, their knowledge, and create an alliance which is formed to share their internal capabilities, their assets, and their resources to achieve common objective. Now, there is a difference between joint venture and strategic alliance. A joint venture can be defined as the association of two or more companies entitles for coming together to form a separate legal entity to carry out continuous business operations, whereas in strategic alliance, the association of two or more companies coming together to form a separate legal entity to carry out continued business operations. So, what happens in joint venture is that they form a legal entity which is separate to carry out and continue their operations, whereas in strategic alliance, they come together to form a separate legal entity to carry out continuous business operations. The objectives of joint venture are to mitigate the risk of business, whereas the objective of strategic alliance is to maximize the returns. Their agreements or contracts are also different. For example, in joint venture, there exists a contract or agreement before forming a joint venture, whereas in strategic alliance, existence of contract is not necessary. So there may or may not be any contract. There is a difference between separate legal entity of joint venture and strategic alliance. In joint venture, there exists a separate legal entity having its own separate identity. However, in strategic alliance, no, there does not exist any separate entity. Now, when it comes towards the independence of the organizations, joint venture is independent entity existing once a joint venture is formed. That means there is no independent entities when they become into a joint venture. Their autonomy will be lost. Their autonomy will not be lost or affected. Whereas in strategic alliance, the independent entities continue to operate and does not lose their existence. The management of joint venture is based on a bilateral form of management. There is association, there is coordination between the two companies in this regard. When we come towards the strategic alliance, delegated management system exists where a separate management is hired to continue to do their course of action. Now, coming towards the last form of international business, which is foreign direct investment or direct foreign investment. This is the most riskier one. It involves a lot of investment and capital cost, because the company which was previously operating in one location, now they are expanding their business and moving with their entire system of operations into adding it to the different countries. So it is where companies manufacture locally to look to capitalize on the low cost of labor, to avoid higher import taxes and to reduce the cost of transportation in the market, and to gain access to the raw material or gaining market entry. We are seeing different companies coming to the Pakistan with the foreign direct investment. An example to it is Mobilink Jazz. Telenor is one of the example. Similarly, we have seen different brands moving towards China and establishing their operations and as well as their productions over there. We have seen the different companies moving towards the India, and most importantly, if we look at this South Asia or East Asia or Asian Pacific countries, over here the raw material is readily available, labor is cheap. In order to utilize those factors, these companies from the West are coming and expanding their business and doing a foreign direct investment in these regions. Now, we will move towards the chapter number 8 of your course, which is foreign direct investment, being one of the most riskiest one. So we are going to discuss it in detail in the coming slides. So, what is foreign direct investment? Basically, foreign direct investment occurs when a firm invests directly in new facilities to produce or capture the market in the foreign country. So happening is that they continue their business in their home country as well as they expand their business to the foreign country, which becomes their host country, and the firm becomes a multinational enterprise. FDI can be in the form of two different types. One is called greenfield investment, and the other is in the form of acquisition or merger. In the greenfield investment, the company establishes a wholly new operations in the foreign country. That means they start from the ground zero, from the scratch, and they build, construct their all production plants, their services, infrastructure that is required to them, and they invest a huge amount. Whereas on a contrary to the greenfield investment, they can opt for acquisition or merger with the existing firms in the foreign countries. So this is another area where we can do FDI. As an example, over here, the Paktel was acquired by China Telecom, which is now operating in the name by the name of Zone in Pakistan. So this is an example of FDI through acquisition or merger in Pakistan. Most countries have their cross border or taxes imposed in a several fields of production or sectors. So in order to overcome those excessive or huge amount of taxes imposed, the companies analyze their foreign markets, they assess, and if it is feasible, ideal to them, so they go and they prefer to go for a foreign direct investment. And the companies, they prefer to opt for cross-border investment in the form of a merger or acquisition rather than greenfield investment, because greenfield investment required huge amount of capital, and it also delays your entry into the market because you have to establish your new setup from the ground zero, and then once it is complete, then you are able to launch. So there are a lot of factors and a lot of investment that is required. However, the companies prefer to go for the merger or acquisitions in the foreign country with the companies which are already established in the market. As an example, when the walls was coming to Pakistan, they acquired Polka, which was a renowned brand in Pakistan. So, with the help of this, they overcome the fundamental investment concept of greenfield investment. Now, in this slide, we are going to discuss why these companies choose acquisition over a greenfield investments. The firms prefer to acquire existing assets because a merger and acquisition are quick to execute as compared to a greenfield investment. It is easier and perhaps less risky for the firm to acquire desired assets than to build them from the ground zero. And more importantly, the firms believe that they can increase the efficiency of an acquired unit by transferring capital, technology, and management skills. Another common element is that they get the existing setup as well as the existing customers, which will take a lot of time if they prefer or they go for the green investment. Now, what are the patterns of FDI? Now, we will be talking about the flow of FDI. By flow of FDI, we mean to say the amount of FDI undertaken over a given period of time. This refers to the outflow of FDIs as well as inflow of FDIs. Outflow of FDIs are the flow of FDIs out of a country. This means, for example, a US based company or how many US based companies are investing in other countries. This means that they are earning from the US market, but now they are transferring that earning that they had and investing it into some other country. So that is called outflow of FDI. Inflow of FDI is basically when another country's company is investing in in your country. For example, a Pakistani-based company is investing and establishing their units in US. So this is called inflow to a US market. Now, this concept was basically to understand the inflow and outflow of money and resources from one country to another country. This gives you an idea that whether your government has imposed such laws and regulations due to which your companies are not feeling comfortable doing business or expanding business within the country, and there are different avenues or areas where the governments are supporting companies to come and invest in their market, and they are giving them different facilities. Tax exemptions can be one facility, cheap labor, infrastructure, access to the raw material, and so on. Due to globalization of production and globalization of market, we are seeing an increasing trend in the FDI, both inflow and outflow. So you can see over the last 30 to 40 years, it has been observed that the number of FDIs have increased both in the developing countries as well as developed country. The graph of comparison of FDI flow, inflow and outflow will be discussed in the later slides. As you can see in this graph, over the years there has been increasing trend in the FDI's outflows. The FDI pattern of inflow from 1995 to 2010 is presented over here, and the comparison of developed nations as well as developing countries. So if you can see that in 2010, both developing nations and developed nations have shown almost similar level of inflow into their economy. Here we will answer the question that why there is a tremendous growth in FDI. Basically, it is due to different factors. One, the countries has imposed protectionism to protect their baby industries and their domestic producers. So the multinational firms wants to exploit it with the fear of protectionism so that they can overcome the trade barriers, and once they start producing on a domestic level in the foreign country, so they can overcome that protectionism. The second reason of FDI growth is due to the changes in political and economic factors. We are observing that there is a deregulation, markets, companies are becoming more privatized. There are few restrictions on FDI because the foreign countries or the foreign nations, they prefer to have FDI because it is a source of not only economic but also their social development. Then we see that there are different trade agreements and treaties between the countries, which is also facilitating the investment. And due to the bilateral and regional treaties that are taking place and the MOUs are being signed on a different occasions between the countries, one of their major factor involved in it is to improve investment in their countries. Fourth and last but not the least factor is the globalization itself as a world economy. Many companies now view world as their own market and they want to show their presence in the whole world, entire world, and they need to grab the markets, and they want to enter into those countries where there is a demand for their products. So it is basically taking advantage of the globalization of markets by itself. So these are some of the factors due to which we see this increasing trend and pattern in FDIs. Now we will discuss the sources of FDIs in terms of the cumulative outflow between 1998 and 2010. If you can see, there is increasing number of outflow of FDI from US and UK. In fact, most of the countries belong to the Europe and US base, except for Japan, which is an Asian country. The reason is their strict market policies, their regulations, the availability of factor of production, and so on. So, therefore, the countries which are providing these factor of production at a cheap price and a cheap rate, these companies are moving their productions from these markets. As a students of international business, a question may arise in your mind that why we have to choose FDI when there are several other options available to continue with your international business or expanding your business on an international level. So why we choose FDI and not choosing exporting or licensing? There are reasons for it. For example, we will start with the exporting. In exporting, we produce goods and services at a home country and then we ship them to the client or a foreign country for a sale. There are different reasons why we will not go for exporting. Maybe. For example, cost of transportation, which is called freight charges. Maybe freight charges are too much for the product, so for our goods, therefore we may not opt for it. Second, maybe protectionism, maybe tariff, maybe custom duties, and so on. So these are the factors which may not be supporting the exports. The second thing is licensing. Uh, Licensing is also a good choice, but when we have the potential to do and go for foreign direct investment, we may not consider licensing in this regard. Licensing can be an ideal one. However, due to the limitations of the licensing itself, it creates questions in the mind of the companies or the management that why not go and opt for FDI. For example, the fundamental basis of choosing FDI or licensing lies in the internationalization theory, which seeks to explain why a firm often prefer foreign direct investment or licensing as a strategy for entering into a foreign market. When we look into the internationalization of the internationalization theory, three major drawbacks of licensing are being discussed. First, licensing may result in a firm giving away valuable technological know-how to a potential foreign competitor. So they may lose their competitive advantage by giving licensing to the other firm, and which in the near future may become their rival and their competitive advantage would be lost. The second problem with licensing is that it does not give a firm to have a tight control over manufacturing or marketing or strategy or doing business, because in licensing there are no such rules which the company or the licensee will have to be abide upon. So there are different strategic and operational reasons attached to it. The third problem with the licensing is the competitive advantage itself, where such capabilities are often not amenable to the licensing, while the foreign licensee may be able to physically reproduce the product under the license. It often may not be able to do so effectively as the firm could itself. So the companies which are more technological sensitive, or they have the secret or production secrets, they will not prefer to go for the licensing. One another common reason why we choose FDI is to place our company into such a country where we can expand and do businesses in the nearby countries or the border linked countries as well. So it gives us an advantage over the rival firms in our home country, that we are being placed in the another country where we have the ease or access to the different markets in the specific region, and we can exploit the business in those specific market. Sometimes the companies often prefer to do FDI for those products where their products on a life cycle is at the maturity or decline stage in a particular country, for example, their host country. For example, the products which are on the maturity or decline stage in US, maybe they want to shift to the different countries or foreign markets where that product would start from the introductory stage, and they can continue taking benefit or capturing the market in this regard. The fundamental choice of FDI is based on a theory or a concept known as electric paradigm, introduced by John Dunning. This paradigm is an approach that analyzes whether the company should make foreign direct investment or not. This model determines whether a business should expand abroad through foreign direct investment or should opt for other forms of international business. This theory is revolving around three components, which are ownership, location, and internationalization. Therefore, it is also known as OLI framework. This paradigm assumes that institutions will avoid transactions in open market if the cost of completing the same actions internally or in-house carries a low price. This paradigm was introduced in 1979 by a scholar named John Dunning. We need to understand this phenomenon based on the three factors. The first one under consideration is ownership advantages. It includes proprietary information and various ownership rights of a company. This may consist of branding, copyrights, trademarks, or patent rights, etc. Ownership advantage are typically considered to be intangible, but gives you a competitive advantage, such as your brand image, reputation for reliability, etc. So, if these factors are going to be affected in the other form of international business, therefore, the company may opt for FDI. Coming towards the location advantage, which is also a necessary one. Companies must assess whether there is a competitive and comparative advantage to perform specific functions within a particular nation or not. Location advantage can refer to natural or created resources, but either way, they are generally immovable. They require a partnership with foreign investor in that location to be utilized to full advantage. Thus, it means that if the factors of production are readily available and they are cheap, the company may opt for FDI or otherwise the other forms of international business. The last composite of this model or framework is internationalization advantage. Signal when it is better for the organization to produce a particular product in house or, on a contrary, contracting with a third party. At times, it may be more cost effective for the organization to operate from a different market location while they keep doing the work in house. If a business decides to outsource the production, it may require negotiating partnerships with local producers. However, taking an outsourcing route only makes financial sense if the contracting company can meet the organization needs and the quality standards are not compromised at a lower cost. Thus, we may opt for FDI. Otherwise, the other forms of international business are important. So, what we can learn from this Denning's electric paradigm is that the company needs to understand if the ownership is going to be affected, copyrights are going to be violated, so the company may prefer going for FDI. The second one is location specific advantages. If the company can acquire the factors of production on a cheap basis and it can reduce their cost of production, so they may opt for FDI. And lastly, we discussed the third factor of internationalization. If it is giving them advantage and they want to take it to create their competitive advantage, they may go for FDI. Otherwise, they will opt for the other forms of international business. The theoretical basis for foreign direct investment lies at the two extremes. The first extreme is radical view, and on the other extreme is a free market view, whereas in between them is the view of pragmatism. Radical view is based on the fundamentals of Marxist political and economic theories, where it is believed that multinational enterprises or multinational firms are an instrument of imperialist domination and the tool for exploiting host countries to the exclusive benefits of their capitalist imperialist home countries. As we know that the advanced countries or the capitalist countries are keeping their key technology in a tight control, and for them it is important that jobs in subsidiaries must go to the home view. FDI may be important to them just because they do not want to give up on their technologies and their advancements. In the radical view, FDIs by the enemy of advanced capitalist nations keep the less developed countries of the world relatively backwards and dependent on the advanced capitalist nations for investment, jobs, and technologies. Thus, according to the extreme version of this view, no country should ever permit foreign corporations to undertake FDI because they can never be instruments of economic development, only of economic domination. This believes that being a multinational company of an advanced country or a country with a capitalist mindset, they should never create jobs or become a source of investment expansion in the GDP of the low economic growth countries, which is exactly as per the Marxist opinions or school of thought. On an opposite of it, or on a contrary, free market view believes that the internationalization of markets is important to create and keep comparative advantage. This is rooted into the classical economic factors introduced by Adam Smith and international trade theories of David Ricardo. They believe that we have to strengthen ourselves and others by internationalization, explanation of FDI. The free market view argues that international production should be distributed among the countries according to the theory of comparative advantage, and the countries should specialize in the production of those goods and services that they can produce most efficiently, and therefore the absolute advantage should not be created. While several other countries are neither agreeing to the radical view nor to the free market view, therefore they opted for the middle value, which created the third phenomena of pragmatic internationalization, where they believe that FDI has been both beneficial for inflow of the capital, technology, skills, and jobs, and cost on the other side. So, FDIs is important to develop and improve not only their economic condition but also their social conditions and their standard of life. So that now, what does FDI mean to the host country? It is very important because if we keep ourselves in a pragmatic nationalist view, where they believe that there are both benefits and costs associated with the FDI. On one hand, FDI give the benefits to a host country by bringing capital, skills, technology, and jobs. But on the other hand, it has cost as well because the companies which are investing in the host country or into the foreign country, they are taking their benefits out of it in the form of profits and outflow of the money that they have made through profit. So the balance of payment positions needs to be very important in this regard as well. There are both benefits and costs to the host country through FDI. Benefits are resources transfer, employment creation, balance of payments, and effect on competition, which leads towards the economic growth. However, if we look at the cost of inward FDI for the host country, it adverse effect on the competition within the host country because the local companies with the higher economy of scale level or with the high cost of production may not be able to compete with the technologically advanced and giant firms. It also has adverse effect on the balance of payment and perceived loss of national sovereignty and autonomy in the form of when the companies invest and do business in the areas or the sectors which are more secure or more security related sectors. In the previous slides, we discussed the advantages and disadvantages or benefits and costs of FDI towards the host country, which is a foreign country. Now, in this slide, we will discuss what does it mean to the home country. There are benefits as well as cost of doing FDI. The benefits includes positivity or positive effect on the capital account from the inward flow of a foreign earning, which is very important. It becomes a part of your economic development. It is shown in your country's GNI. Second benefit is the employment effect that arise from outward FDI. Your people, your citizens of the host country will get job opportunities and they will be accommodated in the jobs, particularly in the management position, managerial, middle, and top management positions in the other countries. So that is a job creation as well, and also a mean or a source of earning foreign remittances. Yet another advantage that they gain is learning from the skills from foreign markets that can be subsequently transferred back to the home country. So the exposure of your labor and your business that can give to the your local citizens and bringing back that experience and exposure into your country can be very fruitful in a longer run. Other than the cost there, other than benefits, there is a cost associated with doing FDI as well. It includes a negative effect on balance of payment because the money in the initial investment is going out of your country then the employment may also be a negatively affected, because it is a matter of fact that if a country is expanding their business through FDI in some other country, in a foreign country, so maybe, for example, a Japanese company starts and investing in Pakistan, and it creates 2,000 jobs in Pakistan market. But eventually, this is on the cost. When if the Japanese company has established or expanded their business within the Japan, they would have created 2,000 jobs in their own market. So that is one of the effect of cost of FDI that is essential to be taken under consideration by the home country. Now, the question, how does the government influence FDI? There are different options available to the governments, which are in practice, they can be or FDI, or they may not be supporting inwards FDI. The government may be supporting outward FDI, or they may not support outward FDI. So it depends on the political ideology and the government policies, that how and what they prefer. So one by one, we are going to discuss these options or influence of government on FDI, both positive and negative, on both inwards and outward FDI. The first choice that the government may prefer is that they can encourage outward FDI. Why a government will encourage outward FDI is that they may want their companies to get involved in outward FDI, that is, going out of their host country and investing in a less developed or underdeveloping countries. This may be due to their political benefits as well. They may invest in a political unstable countries. Maybe several advanced countries will create special funds and provide loans to those countries who are wishing to invest in developing countries. They may give extra benefits in the form of tax exemptions, or they may be very encouraging to create extra profits from investing into countries and bringing back those profits to the host country. Uh, Previously, it has been seen that some of the world powerful countries may force the less powerful countries or underdeveloping and underprivileged countries to get into agreements and allow their companies to invest in their companies for their political empowerment and political show. On the contrary, the governments can restrict outward FDI as well, as we have seen that due to outward FDI and their cost to the country, to the host country, the political governments in the developed countries has restricted outward FDI from time to time. Their policies were imposed to limit capital outflow because of the less tax collection or increase in the unemployment are some of the factors due to which the government wants to control the capital, and they do not encourage taking out those finances or capital out of their market, out of their country. In addition, countries have occasionally tried to manipulate tax rules to try to encourage their firms to invest at their home again. And the recent example of Donald Trump on US, where he is trying to bring back all the production units to America. The reason is that he is trying to develop his economy more stronger and also to create jobs in the local market. So these may be similar reasons due to which the governments can restrict outward FDI. Now, the third option is that the government can encourage inward FDI. By inward FDI, we mean to say that encouraging the foreign companies to come and invest in their country. That is to boost their economy and to reduce the trade deficit and also to improve their economic conditions. As take an example of Pakistan, in the recent years, Pakistan is creating an atmosphere and a business friendly environment where they try to bring businesses and they encourage businesses, foreign business companies to come and invest in Pakistan so that they can take advantage of their clientele, their customers, and citizens. But on the other hand, it will be a source of job creation, value creation, may also reduce the imports in the country, and so on. So the countries can encourage inward FDI and they offer incentives to the firms who invest in their specific countries. The fourth option is that the government can or maybe restrict inward FDI. That means they do not want foreign companies to invest through foreign direct investment in their country. A sort of restrictions are imposed in different countries by their governments to restrict companies from investing into a country as a whole or in a specific field or a specific sector. That may be because they do not want to give ownership and they want to restrict these companies from getting ownership in the specific sector. Foreign companies are excluded from specific fields like law and order related, security related, maybe in the technology related companies, maybe a media houses, they are restricted and there are no allowance by the government in the host country to give up on those factors. Foreign firms are often excluded from certain sectors on the ground of national security or competition just to avoid based on their sovereignty, or they do not want to give up on their most important assets, most important technology. That may be one of the component. Second is maybe they do not want to bring competition in a specific field where they are trying to establish their own competitive advantages and they want to be self-sufficient. Some other countries, however, are also not giving ownerships. Like you have to take the local businessman as a partner for a reason to be establishing your business in that specific country. So every country from time to time may impose outward FDI restriction or encourage outward FDI, and from the policies of a host country, maybe they encourage inward FDI, and after some time they may restrict or discourage inward FDI. So it depends on the situation, economic condition, political condition, their different factors are part of it. So the government has certain influences and it plays a major role in deciding the future and fate of FDI in a country. Coming towards the closure of this topic of FDI, now let us look at the FDI from the manager's perspective. There are three major aspects that a manager should know and understand regarding the FDI. The first one is manager needs to consider what trade theories implies about FDI. So you being a student need to learn what trade theories are going to be used or influencing you in your future, and then link them with the government policies to understand their perspective of FDI. So it is very important for you to understand the government perspective regarding encouragement and restriction or discouragement of FDI inflow and outflow both. Second thing is the direction of FDI can be explained through the location specific advantages argument associated with the John Dunning. So you need to understand the three factors of that or the paradigms of the John Dunning's theory, which are discussed previously by OLI. So, ownership, location, and institutionalization, internationalization, pardon me. These are important. So, you have to focus on these three aspects, study their advantages and disadvantages, and decide accordingly. The third thing is the host government's attitude towards FDI is an important variable in decision about where to locate foreign production facilities and where to make the foreign direct investment. So before deciding a country to expand through your foreign direct investment, you need to understand their policies and their laws accordingly. Last but not the least, deciding on your expansion of towards international business, this framework will give you a clear idea when to opt for which choice. For example, the first one, how high are the transportation costs and tariff? As we discussed in the previous slides, that if the transportation cost is low and tariffs are low as well, then the ideal choice is to go for exports. In case cost of transportation and tariff are high, then we need to understand and move towards the second question, that is know-how amenable to licensing? That whether you can opt for licensing or not. So if you do not want to give up on the fundamental factors and the limitations of licensing are high, then FDI is a preferred choice. If it is yes, then we move towards another question. Is tight control over foreign operations is required? That means we are referring towards the franchising component. If you do not want to give up on your technology, your trade secrets, your formulas, your business patterns, your operations, and you are worried about that you are going to lose your competitive advantage, and some people or the company through to which you are giving your licensing or franchising, they may exploit it, then the better choice is to opt for FDI. If no, then we will move towards the other question, that can know-how be protected by license contract? That means can you put clause in your agreement for licensing regarding your worries? If not, and the other party is not agreeing to it, then better go for FDI. And if you get the answer in yes, then the preferred and easiest choice and less risky choice is licensing. This was all about forms of international business and foreign direct investment. If you have some questions or some points needs clarification, please you can ask in the group. In a meanwhile, please try to understand it and you would be given a weekly assignment related to the topic discussed today and you have to complete it. Thank you very much for listening to this lecture. Please stay home and stay safe.